So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be talking about the isms of the 19th century. And so this is sort of an introduction overview, very brief overview of the various isms. I'm actually going to read a section of Palmer aloud to you here. And then the bulk of the work will actually be you guys creating presentations or podcasts. We'll be talking about this in class on various isms of the 19th century and how we can trace them to today. So just to start, I'm going to read a section from Palmer. It's section 53, number 53, the advent of the isms. The combined forces of industrialization and of the French Revolution led, after 1815, to a proliferation of new doctrines and movements, most of which contributed to a general European revolution in 1848. As for the 33 years from 1815 to 1848, there is no better way of grasping the long-run meaning than to reflect on the number of enduring isms that arose at the time. The isms developed as more or less systematic attempts to describe a coherent set of political, cultural, or social beliefs, and the advocates of each ism usually organized groups or public movements that sought to implement their ideas by changing political institutions or transforming certain aspects of modern social and cultural life. Each of these isms, so now this is back to me, the words themselves were created and sort of solidified and defined and appear in the various countries' languages by the 1850s. However, a lot of the ideas were established before that. So what I want to do today is sort of just briefly go through some of the big ideas for them. Because without understanding them, it would be really hard to understand the history of the world of those events that were characterized at that time. So just very briefly, the first of the isms I want to spend some time on is this movement called Romanticism. Romanticism really came about as a rejection to the ultra-hyper-rationalism of the radical phase of the French Revolution. It's not a political movement, although different political movements are going to adopt the Romantic movement as part of their way of expressing themselves and their desires. It's primarily an artistic movement. It is one that really rejects reason, emphasis of emotion instead. And so I like to talk about in Romanticism in terms of online dating. A romantic would truly reject, and this is of course not the romantic lovey-dovey term, but the idea that you could find your soulmate through algorithms and mathematical calculations online is very logical, very pragmatic, very much based in what's rational and reasoned. And the romantic would totally firmly reject online dating and argue that there is no mathematical equation for love and resist that. And so the romanticism is much more about the gut response, the emotional response to an event, rather than what is logical or mental. And so the romantics love the unclassifiable, the non-rational experiences. A lot of romantics aren't necessarily religious, but they love religion. They love this idea of walking into these cathedrals and the scale of them, and this idea of an unknown God is very much aligned with the philosophy there. And so as a result, they're going to look back to the medieval age with a lot of fascination. And so we see a revival of medieval styles of art in particular and architecture with a Gothic revival at this time. Conservatism is a political ideology. It's in contrast with liberalism. Conservatism as an ideology, though, although the name didn't come about until the 19th century, certainly is not a novel idea. Actually, the whole idea of it is to uphold the traditional institutions of aristocracy, monarchy, and the Catholic Church, or church in general as an institution of power. They are generally opposed to representational governments that are sought by liberals. A lot of the ideas of conservatives is grounded in the works of Edmund Burke, who did a lot of his writings at the time of the French Revolution. And as you can see in this cartoon, Edmund Burke is the figure with the very long nose who's sniffing out a revolutionary in this cartoon, holding both a cross and a crown, sort of the two main values of conservatives. He did call for some gradual reform But he viewed that the French Revolution was dangerous because it was based on ideas that are too vague, and that reform is valuable but must preserve the past. And so conservatism sometimes became nationalist, but most often nationalists were more of the liberals, and primarily counter-revolutionary. The most famous conservative will be Metternich, who was organizing he's the Austrian foreign minister who organized the Congress of Vienna. And Austrian Habsburgs in general really saw the need for conservative leadership and ideology. For liberals and nationalism are really going to threaten the whole foundation of the Austrian Empire and its many, many roots. Liberalism is actually a pretty difficult term to define. The first usage of the term liberalism actually refers to educated Spanish elite who resisted against Napoleon's rule in Spain. However, they also wanted reforms of the monarchy at the same time. And so, but we see in Spain, and then the liberal movement then expands to France once the Bourbon monarchy is reestablished, and they're against the French monarchy, but they're not calling for a whole French Revolution. And so, but liberalism it varies from country to country. In England, we actually see many Whigs and Tories adopting liberalism, and that's actually why we see the establishment, as this cartoon is showing, of the Liberal Party, which is founded in the 1850s. But the primary ideas that they promote in liberalism is going to be liberty and equality, a written constitution, the preservation of individual rights, such as freedom of the press, freedom of religion, the limited extension of voting rights, not widespread extension, but some voting rights to others, and equality before the law that's open to all to talent, and all careers open to talent. And the ideal form of government would be a constitutional monarchy. So they're not radical. They value laissez-faire economy, free trade. They're frown upon any one established church. They instead would favor religious toleration. And most liberals outside of England are going to be looking at England and Great Britain as the model of what a liberal state would look like. Now, in England itself, we're going to see the roots of another movement called radicalism, which in other countries will evolve into republicanism, and then even socialism has its roots within radicalism. So radicalism first appeared in the 1820s England among working class leaders who are looking to go back to the root of things, quote unquote root of things, that's where we get the word radicalism, and reconstruct laws, courts, prisons, poor relief, municipal organizations, the rotten boroughs, trying to really reform Parliament to what are the modern issues of the time. So sort of like, let's stop basing ourselves on tradition and instead let's go back to the roots and start from the ground up. So they're really calling for a lot of parliamentary reforms. They are anti-clerical. They oppose the monarchy. Some want to abolish the royalty altogether. They're against the Church of England as an institution of power, and they want every adult Englishman to be able to have the right to vote. Republicanism emerges in other areas of Europe based on this radicalism idea. And so they're usually the minority. They're drawn from a lot of intelligentsia, students, writers, working class leaders, elderly veterans. They're many times forming secret societies to try and resist and move these movements. Socialism before 1848, we're not going to go into post-Marx writing the Communist Manifesto, socialism here, but socialism before 1848 is trying to sort of question the trends of the Industrial Revolution, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, that are starting to really make the economic systems of free trade and capitalism start to come to question. So private enterprise is questioned. They start to dislike competition. They're calling for more harmony, coordination, and a fairer system of equal distributions of incomes. Our first socialists sort of come at it in a few different ways. You have figures like Robert Owen, who are trying to create these socialist factory systems, sort of individualized ideal societies that are little utopian model communities. Then in France, during the early revolutions, post-French Revolution, you have people like Count Henri de Saint-Simon, who is going to call for public ownership of industries with control in the hands of its capitalists, so sort of a capitalist model within government ownership of industry. Another man, Charles Fourier, wants to organize different phalanx, different phalansteries, little smaller utopian models that are government run and modeled to help promote industry within France. Both of those are sort of in response to France's lagging behind in industrialization. So they're trying to respond to the British industrial growth and modernize while also being moderated and regulated by the government. And then you also have a man named Louis Blanc, who is an editor of a Paris paper who wants social workshops, state-supported manufacturing, workers who are going to be able to labor by and for themselves, as well as universal suffrage. So there's a lot of trends across radicalism, republicanism, and socialism. And then the final one I want to quickly mention is nationalism. It's also a new ism that's arising in the 19th century, which is really developing out of the French Revolution and Napoleon. This feeling of fraternity, a reaction against the internationalist system of Napoleon, where instead separate states are saying, no, we don't want to be part of this global European idea. Instead, we want to have our individual country's identity. Definitely led by this movement's definitely led by intellectuals, and we do see both conservative and liberal nationalists. Conservative nationalists definitely emphasize cultural nationalism, whereas liberal nationalists are more emphasizing political nationalism. The definition for a lot of nationalism is based upon a state, upon a specific area of land, where people can have a similar nationality and speak the same language. Nationalism in Eastern Europe remained much more cultural than political, and it's really led by people in Poland as well as the Czechs, and it's inherently revolutionary. These different groups must be secret societies. They're going to be punished. They're going to be persecuted, and in these different ways. One final ism is feminism, really developing out of an agency, a desire for greater say after the French Revolution, where a lot of that language emerges for women's rights, and the question of rights comes into hand. So these different isms we're going to be developing a lot more individually in small groups, and then together we're going to be presenting them in some form of medium as the week moves on. So have a great day, and all my best. Take care.